How you doing, YouTube? Matt with Massive Beer Reviews, back with another massive beer review, quick hitter review. Said review twice, but, you know, that's what happens when you quick hit stuff. Anyway, quick hitter things. This is basically a fancy word for when my camera fails, and I still want to post a review. So, what we have here is a rum barrel-aged quad from Barrel Monks Brewing out of Boca Raton, Florida. I did a couple of their beers. I was lucky enough to have them reach out to me and send me off some beers, and this is one of them. This is, I think they sent me 5 or 6 beers, and this is the last one I think I'm having from them. No, second to last one. And mixed bag. Most of the stuff I've really dug, and none of it was bad so far by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just tend to be a little bit nitpicky. A little bit more kind of hard on Belgians, I guess you'd say. And this one I was really kind of interested to go into because, you know, how many Belgian quads do you see? Sure, nowadays you see a lot of people doing, you know, La Trappe is the biggest one. They do that big barrel age thing with their quads, and a couple people have done it, but you don't see it all that often. So I was interested to dive into it. I ended up reviewing the base, and that's a regular review that I actually went through, and my camera didn't screw up. But this one was interesting. There was a bit of a disconnect between the actual barrel and the barrel. You get a bit of that rum in there. It doesn't come off boozy at all. You get a little of that buttery Caribbean rum, and Caribbean rum comes off a little buttery to me in a good way. And you get that kind of Belgian quad, but the Belgian quad came off a bit kind of Americanized. It had this kind of more spicy brown sugar as opposed to a kind of real Belgian candied sugar. In and of itself, you marry those two together, typically a rum barrel and that, you end up with something pretty nice because you're going to have that kind of sharpness of that Belgian candied or non-Belgian candied sugar, that kind of more brown sugar in that rum barrel, and you're going to end up with rounded corners. And something a bit softer, something a bit more aged, which I think is one of the best things for Belgian beers, at least a couple years on them. This had this aggressive carbonation to it, to the point where I'm kind of peeved I didn't get it on camera. But, you know, I took the cork and cage off it, and the cork immediately rose and slowly rose to the point where I just kind of tapped it once or twice, and it popped off by itself. So there's an extra carbonation to this. It's kind of like a really sharp, aggressive carbonation. It doesn't taste much like infection, more than just an overcarbonation. I don't know if it's from yeast or an extra critter that didn't turn it sideways, but there's this aggressive, sprightly kind of overcarbonation to it that cancels out all of that wanted roundness and softness. And that kind of set the tone for the beer. Not a bad beer by any means, but it's just that it amplifies now. Instead of that barrel aging in a time kind of rounding everything off, that sprightliness kind of amplifies that kind of Belgian, not so Belgian brown sugar kind of candiness thing going on there. And the rum, where it should be kind of softer, the rum barreling should be kind of a soft thing, ends up being singular. It almost like throws a divider down the middle and says, okay, it definitely is a barrel-aged beer with a kind of American Belgian, and it ends up kind of amplifying, I don't want to say its flaws, but it's individual bits and pieces that I think, while sometimes that might be a good thing to amplify, in this case it wasn't, for the lack of better explanation. So it's a tasty beer. It's not a bad beer. I don't think it's infected. I did get a lot of green apple notes from a distance on it, but tasting, I just think it's just one of those things where it got a little something going on. There wasn't the best thing in the world, to where it overcarbonated, and it ended up being not the best representation of a barrel-aged quad. Tasty, nice. I'll drink the whole thing. It's not going to go to spoil. It's not that far off. But if you talk to me straight and be like, I want a Belgian-aged, or I said that twice already, rum barrel-aged Belgian quad, the thoughts that pop into my head, I don't get that from this beer. I actually get a bit of the opposite. I get more aggressive than rounded, and that's kind of the whole point of it. You know what I mean? Add complexity, amplify those soft, rich, fruited, dark fruits, but at the same time kind of rub those edges down to where they're super rounded, and that aggressive, sprightly kind of carbonation just cancels that all out. So tasty beer, good beer. Would love to try it again. Maybe it's an individual bottle thing, or it's a batch thing. I don't know. So I wouldn't definitely kind of steer clear of it. Age might kind of turn it into something a bit weird in a good or bad way, but fun beer nonetheless. But it's a brewery in the States, not even the States, in Florida, doing Belgian beers. So that in and of itself is worth checking it out. So if you like Belgian beers, if you like barrel aged beers, if you like yeast driven beers and hop forward or non hop forward driven beers, it's worth checking out, especially if you're in Florida, because you don't see it that often. So supporting good people, making good beers, and from the beers I've had as a whole, and the people I've talked to, they're pretty awesome people. So worth a pickup if you're in this style of beer. So there you go. Down there, Worth and Stuff. Me, Massive Beers. If you want to check me out on social media, hopefully you guys enjoyed this quick hitter, and hopefully see you next time. Cheers.